of the dark, are you?
What's up everyone, China Cycling here. Today we're looking at the XCadey 2XPOWER dual-sided power meter. These are available here in China for 3,000 RMB on an R8000 Ultegra crankset, which is about $430 US. Or you can get the power meter installed on your own crankset for about 280 bucks. I got mine installed on a 105 crankset for reasons I'll talk about later. I got this power meter about 8 months ago, and I'll be honest, at first I thought it was trash. But I dug it out recently and updated the firmware, and it really surprised me. Let's take a look. So I originally bumped into the XCadey guys way back in May of last year at the Shanghai bike show. I was interested to check out their power meters just because the prices were just so cheap. They'll add a single-sided power meter to your crank arm for 650 RMB or about 90 bucks. Or you can buy an Ultegra crank arm with the power meter already installed for about 1,600 RMB or about $230 US. Shane Miller did a review of that one over on his channel last year. I'll try to remember to put a link to that down below. I was also impressed with the amount of products they had. Their spider-based power meters were available for lots of different SRAM and rotor applications. And spider-based power meters aren't something you see a lot of companies doing, especially the Chinese companies. After the show, they offered to install one of their power meters on one of my cranksets for me. As regular viewers know, I'm a bit of a SRAM fanboy, and none of my bikes actually have Shimano cranks. I had a set of rotor cranks lying around which they could install a power meter onto, but I figured most of my viewers used Shimano cranks, so it made the most sense to use Shimano. If you're a huge power meter nerd, you'll have kept up with the ongoing inconsistency that all dual-sided Shimano-based power meters have. That's right, your Shimano, Stages, Pioneer, 4i, Giant, etc. They all underread on the right side crank, especially when on a static trainer. Others can explain it a lot better than me, and if you want a really technical video about it, check out Keith Wakeham's video on the subject. Again, I'll try to put the link down below to that one. One takeaway from that video was that the asymmetric design of the Shimano right-hand crank adds to the inaccuracy. I noticed that externally at least, the 105 crankset has a symmetrical design compared to the R8000 Ultegra and the Dura Ace cranks. So I decided to get the unit installed on a 105 crankset to see if there was any luck with that. So I purchased a brand new 105 crankset with 165mm crank arms. Being a short rider at 1.68 meters tall, I use 165 cranks. If you're under 1.7 meters tall and you've never experimented with shorter cranks, I really recommend it. It may only be a small difference, but a few millimeters can make a big difference. Just ask the latest. Anyway, I marked up the cranks with my initials just to make sure it was my own cranks that came back to me and sent them away in the post. I'm in China, so just 1 week later, my crankset came back to me, now in a fancy box with all sorts of charging paraphernalia, etc. And with my initials still on there, confirming it was indeed my own cranks. Cool. Installing the crankset is super easy. It goes on just like a normal Shimano crankset. no special requirements for torque other than Shimano's own recommendations. I've always installed it without a torque wrench, and I don't think it's affected the accuracy at all, but more on that later. In my rush to test it out, I hooked it up to my Wahoo Element bolt no problem, and went out for a quick spin with my Garmin Vector 2S on there for a bit of a comparison. In my haste, I hadn't realized the right side power meter was completely out of battery, but the power meter was still functioning as a single-sided left-hand unit, by measuring my left power and doubling it to provide an estimate of my total power. The first ride was perfect. The data matched my Garmin Vector 2S to within a few watts, and everything was looking like happy days. I gave both sides of the unit a charge, again a pretty easy task because the supplied USB charging cables are magnetic and just kind of suck themselves in the charging area. You can't put them on the wrong way because the magnets just repel and they'll turn themselves around the right way. So both ends of the chargers are just standard USB charging leads, and it even comes with a splitter, so you can just plug them both into this and then plug this into your charger of choice. I just use a USB portable battery pack to put it there to charge. It's a lot easier because it means your bike doesn't need to be next to a wall socket or anything. Battery life with a full charge is a claimed 150 hours, which for your average rider doing about 12 hours a week is going to last you about 3 months. Now with the power meter functioning as a fully two-sided device, it was time to do some more rides. My Garmin 2 pedals at the time were actually only single-sided, and while the left pedal agreed with the left crank arm, the XCadey in general thought about 60% of my power was coming from my left leg, and only 40% coming from my right leg, and thus the total power number it reported and the Garmin reported were totally different. Like 60-40, that's a pretty crazy difference. That means my left leg was putting out 50% more power than the right leg. Now, even when I was really concentrating on pedaling perfect circles and pushing equally with both legs, I'd still be seeing numbers of around 57% left and 43% right. But with only a single-sided Garmin Vector to check against, I didn't know if it was the XCadey at fault or my legs at fault. Like, my gut feeling was that the right-hand side was massively under-reading, which, as I discussed earlier, is a documented trend amongst Shimano-based power meters. But I had no way to prove it, and I didn't want to blast XCadey with no evidence to back it up, and so this review kind of just got put on hold while I continued to use the crankset on a multitude of bikes, like always getting data, but never had any idea if it was accurate or not. And so then we fast forward to today, and ironically, in my post-crash state, it's now my left leg, which is visually thinner and weaker than my right leg. It's about 3 to 5 centimeters thinner circumference, meaning now my right leg is a lot more powerful than the left. And now that I'm able to ride the trainer, I thought I'd dig this power meter out and see how my left-right balance was looking now. Only this time, I also had a pair of Favero Assiomas to compare to. If you're not familiar with the Assiomas, they're generally regarded as the dog's danglers when it comes to accuracy. If you don't want to know what the dog's danglers means, it just means they're very good. I put the crankset on my Elves Vanyar, which is now my de facto test mule, and re-downloaded the XCadey app from the Google Play Store. At first, the app couldn't detect the right side power meter. I put them both on charge, but there's no charging lights on the right-hand side. So to all intents and purposes, it just looked dead. Now the left side has a small charging LED, so you know when it's getting juice, but the right side, you're just kind of left guessing. And that's when I discovered a little quirk of the XCadey. You can't detect the power meter with your phone while it's charging. You have to unplug the chargers for the app to discover the unit. Strange, but once you know, it's not really a problem. After fully charging the units and disconnecting the chargers, I was able to find both units with the app. I was also prompted to update the firmware on both units, which again was a bit glitchy, like not knowing if the update had been successful or not. The app froze at 70% complete. And I waited ages and nothing happened. So I kind of force closed the app and restarted the app. And after reconnecting to the unit, I saw the firmware update had actually been successful. But yeah, just a bit of a weird, glitchy experience. Then during the rides, keeping an eye on both head units, the numbers seemed pretty close. After the ride, it was time to take a closer look at the numbers. Pro tip, if you're looking for a way to compare data from multiple power meters, DC Rainmaker has an excellent tool on his website, but it is a paid-for service. I don't blame him, he put work into it and he's got to put food on the table. But if you're looking for a free alternative, for now at least, it's watts.pw. It's currently in open beta and it's absolutely free to use. It's still in beta, so there are a few small bugs, but hey, it's a cool free tool. Let's take a look. Okay, so here we are over on watts.pw diving into the first test. As you can see here, we've got the Assiomas in blue, the XCadeys in red, and the green is the Gravit 3, but we can ignore that for today. You'll see the Gravit 3 is a bit all over the place. This was a brand new uncalibrated Gravit 3, which I was also testing at the same time. But for now, just ignore that. Review of that coming soon. So what we're looking at is the blue and the red. And if we zoom in here, you'll see the blue and the red are doing a mighty good job of tracing each other. Now the blue is the dual-sided Assioma pedals and the red is the XCadey dual-sided crank. And you'll see super close tracing. If we bring up a section, so for this section here, the max power on the Assiomas was 218, max power on the XCadeys was 230, but the averages 108.2 and 109.08, so super close there. A difference of just 0.76%. Going down, it gets a bit sloppy because a bug with watts.pw, when you off-scale the times, it doesn't off-scale in the left-right balance here. But you'll see the left-right balances are a bit off, but we'll dive into that in a minute. Now, looking into the second ride, again, the same setup, same colors, Assioma in blue, XCadey in red, Gravit in green. This is after messing around with the Gravit for a bit, you can see the Gravit getting a bit closer now. But again, zoom in, and the blue and the red, a good job of copying each other. Again, just this random section here, you've got an average of 94.4 on one and 93.8 on the other. So yeah, just a 0.5% difference. Super close. A third ride here, again, the same setup. And if we just move into a section, again, you'll see the blue and the red doing a very good job of tracing each other. The Gravit, like I say, we're ignoring him for today. Investigation still ongoing. But yeah, the Assioma and the XCadey tracing each other super close, just 0.7% difference. And again, if we go look at the left and the right now, the left and the right kind of agreeing with each other on the left-right balance. But you can see the difference between my left leg and my right leg now, recovering from my crash. Now, one thing many people don't actually know is how susceptible power meters are to different riding styles. So subtly, everyone rides a bike and pedals a bike a little differently, and that can actually vary the accuracy of a power meter. One person might test a power meter against a static trainer or against a hub-based power meter and get perfect accuracy. You give the same setup to someone else with a bit of a different pedaling style and you might see a discrepancy. So power meters are pretty sensitive to pedaling style. With my post-injury state, my pedaling is super wonky and super dodgy on the left side. So I wasn't sure if it was some kind of fluke that the power meter was reading accurately for me and it would actually read inaccurately for everyone else. So I enlisted the help of Mrs. China Cycling. And yep, my wife hates cycling, she's not a cyclist, she's got no cycling shoes, but she kindly jumped on the static trainer, jumped on this for me, did a 10-minute session and allowed me to record the data and compare it to everything else as well. So again, she's not a cyclist, she's not wearing cycling shoes or anything, but just to get a different kind of pedaling technique to analyze. One thing to take care of this time is that the colors are different now. So blue is now Assioma and green is XCadey. So just look at blue and green. And again, you'll see blue and green doing a pretty good job of chasing each other. I think the blue here is a bit offset for time. It's not lining up perfectly in time. But the blue and the green still looking pretty close through here. Again, red is gravit now, so we can ignore red, but blue and green looking pretty close. And again, if we look, blue average of 63.3 here, and green an average of 65 here. So again, within 1.5 watts. And then the third test I did with the trainer, just a very short test, testing out ERG mode and seeing if it worked. And ERG mode did work. You can also see the gravit getting a bit more accurate now. So again, we've got Assioma in blue, gravit in red, and XCadey in green. And they're all pretty much doing a better job of tracing each other now. Again, gravit in red being a bit of the odd one out. But the XCadey and the Assioma is doing a good job of tracing each other here. If we look at the averages for this little section here, so it's just like a 3-minute section, but you got an average of 90.9 on one of them, 90.6 on one of them, and 91.0 on one of them. So all three of them behaving pretty well in there. But if you see the gravit line seems a bit more smooth than the two pedal-based power meters, which are a bit more all over the place. And again, looking at the left-right balance now, again, a lot more in line on this section here. So my left leg's doing 57 watts and my right leg's doing 105, 107 watts. So big difference, but it's good to see the two power meters agreeing on that difference. So what do I think of the XCadey 2 Power? Would I recommend it? Yeah, I think so. Advantages are obviously the price. If you're in China, you can pick these up super cheap. If you're not in China, you can still find them dotted around on AliExpress or eBay, but most of the ones on eBay seem to be the single-sided power meter. Advantage number 2, I think, is the accuracy. So I'm not going to say this review is 100% in-depth and proves the accuracy of the unit beyond all shadows of a doubt, as I think nobody on YouTube really has the resources to make those claims. Unless you're in a lab with a treadmill and a whole bunch of maths, it's really hard to definitively say if these things are accurate or not. However, in the world of YouTube reviews, you saw in a data comparison with the Assioma, those two power meters were tracing each other awfully close, which is a pretty solid indication of accuracy. Disadvantages of this power unit? I do like the look of the unit on the drive side, but the sticker on the non-drive side falls off too easily, and you're left with a pretty ugly looking crank arm with like half the sticker on and half the sticker peeling off. But I think they can upgrade their stickers a bit there. Other disadvantages, the app is a bit finicky, but nothing show-stopping. I think the Garmin Connect app is just as glitchy and weird to use. I just really don't know what else you'd want from a power meter. It's got your power, it's accurate, and it even has your pedal smoothness and torque efficiency if you're into that stuff. I personally prefer the Favero Assiomas as my power meter of choice because they're easy to move between bikes. But if you're rocking just one bike, then the 2XPOWER is cheaper and means you're free to use whatever pedal system you want. One thing I haven't tested thoroughly in this review is the waterproofing. XCadey claim IPX6 waterproofing, and I've ridden this in the rain and washed it with a jet wash, and mine is still alive and well, but I would not say I've tested the waterproofing claims thoroughly. Personally, I think for most people, a single-sided power meter is just fine. Research suggests you can't really do anything with left-right balance data. And torque effectiveness and pedal smoothness are nice to have, but again, research suggests that pros have lower pedal smoothness than amateurs. And trying to train better pedal smoothness is usually detrimental to overall power delivery. If you're a special case like me, post-injury or trying to monitor a recovery of one leg, maybe you can justify the dual-sided approach. My point is, if you're looking at an XCadey power meter, it's probably because you want something cheap. Well, if you want something cheap, just get a single-sided XCadey. If you really want a cheap dual-sided power meter, then sure, I recommend the XCadey 2XPOWER. It also seems that this 105 based power meter isn't under reading on the right hand side like the other Shimano cranks do. I wonder if that's really due to its symmetrical design or not. Maybe I'll leave that for Shane Miller to investigate. Anyway, that's enough for today. Any questions about this particular power meter, let me know in the comments down below. I'm also looking to get my hands on one of their spider-based power meters to use with my Force crankset. So, subscribe so you don't miss that when it comes out. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up so it gets a bit more love from the YouTube algorithm. And as always, China Cycling out.